This is particularly true in the very beginning stages of the process when you have not yet added any color at all. But
in any case, now in the summer at noon, the sun is strong. And even if you're tanned, it's still a stress for the body. So we have this advantage. Ultraviolet light has an oxidizing, stressful, high energy effect. We need it for vitamin D, for a lot of things, but it's oxidizing. However, ultraviolet light never reaches us on its own. It always comes together with infrared. In fact, the ratio is 5% ultraviolet to 60% infrared. And infrared is antioxidant. So the infrared compensates for you. The oxidizing effect of ultraviolet is neutralized by the antioxidant action of the infrared. The fact remains that the intensity during the central hours of the day is very high, and this still represents a stress, especially considering that the average person eats terribly. In other words, our diet, if we want to be out in the sun, should be based on fruits and vegetables that have ripened under the same sun where you are. So if I'm out in the sun and I eat tomatoes that have ripened under that same sun, those tomatoes contain lycopene and all the antioxidants produced by the very same sun that I'm exposing myself to. But if we eat supermarket tomatoes, they come from greenhouses in Holland that have barely seen any sun. All fruit should be eaten locally because fruit has this intelligence. It contains all the antioxidants according to the amount of sun it gets. For example, tropical fruit grows where the sun is very strong, but all the fruit there is packed with antioxidants. Obviously, if someone goes out in the sun and drinks Coca-Cola, eats tramezzini and pizza, they're not getting any antioxidants. Wearing sunglasses, it looks like they're in the shade, and then they put on toxic sunscreen too. It's a disaster. The first 2 hours after sunrise, that's magical light, and it's exactly that light that makes you feel younger. The golden hour, the one that also looks beautiful in photos, is when there's a lot of infrared and very little ultraviolet, and that's exactly when the rejuvenating effect happens. It's the 3 hours before sunset. So when I explain, I say, forget about chemicals. That's the real problem in the world. It's not just the chemicals in sunscreens, but all the detergents, all the additives. The chemical industry is one of the human-made sectors that allows for the highest profit margins. There's a 1 to 300,000 ratio. Some chemical substances have enormous profit margins, but that's humanity's real problem. It's not overpopulation, it's the toxic chemicals that end up in the seas because we put them on our bodies, because we use them as toothpaste, because we use them in cosmetics, because we use them...
Even the very water you drink daily can contain them. If you consistently drink a certain kind of contaminated water your whole life, it can even harm your health in the long run.
I know, I really do know. Anyway, getting back to our beloved glowing sun, if someone truly wants to have the absolute best tan of their entire life, then that right there is the ultimate secret. You stay in the morning. I usually go down to the beach at 8. I stay until 11, and when I leave, everyone else arrives. I see them coming, those with their sunglasses, sunscreen, pizza, Coca-Cola. Then when they leave, I arrive. They leave at 5 and I arrive at 5. I get the best hours of the morning, and during the day you stay in the shade, you write, you read, you do things. There's no need to be there suffering. It should be a joy. Your relationship with sunlight should be a joy. It should be a pleasure. And that's the feeling you get when you're exposed to an intensity that your body is prepared to handle, either because it's been conditioned or because you've gradually increased your exposure. For example, when I organize courses, when I hold courses in Tenerife during the winter, I tell everyone to go get at least a couple of tanning sessions beforehand with low-pressure lamps. Try to eat plenty of fruit, drink lots of water, so you arrive well hydrated, full of antioxidants, and you already have an active base of melanin. That way, you can stay out without worrying too much. Obviously, people don't really use their brains that much. They just do things they think are normal because everyone else does them too. So this whole thing about putting on sunscreen has become so ingrained in common sense that people don't even worry about the harm it might cause to themselves or others. They don't even think about it, but it always comes down to common sense. If you know things, you pay attention, and then you might discover benefits you didn't even know existed or that could be achieved so easily.
Fabio, I'd really like to discuss this specific topic with you today because so many people out there constantly say that the sun prematurely ages your skin, right? You have often talked about the sun as a form of essential nourishment, as something deeply therapeutic. And I even remember once, when I was attending one of your wonderful courses, you mentioned various health problems related to the eyes, such as cataracts, and even issues with cholesterol levels. You mentioned dementia, Alzheimer's. So if you could tell us something about that.
Look, while you're talking, I'm going to open up now. I recently held a live course in Padua on healing light, where I like to document everything and explain it. The books I've written, the only book where everything I say is backed by credible scientific research, because by now we've understood that scientific studies are divided between those that are credible and those that are not. This is one of my most requested courses, the one about healing light, precisely because these are very simple things that, if you start applying them, you really see incredible benefits. The first edition of my book, Healing Light, was published more than 20 years ago. Since I was young, I have dedicated myself to research in this field. But one wonderful thing is that in the last 10 years, there has been an explosion of scientific publications confirming the benefits of photobiomodulation. That is, what used to be called phototherapy is now called photobiomodulation, meaning the ability to modulate biological activity using the energy of light. During the course, by the way, I'll take this opportunity since I'm always being asked about this course. Every now and then I do it in person, and then everyone who lives far away asks me, but when are you going to do it live online as well? So I alternate. I just did it in Padua, and now the next one I'll do live online so that people from all over the world can participate. So as I was saying,
When are you going to do this one online?
the next one. Now, July, look, in July, it's 5 evenings. Afterwards, if you want, I can give you.
Yes, I saw it. July 1st, July 7th, July 15th, July 21st.
Exactly, 4 sessions spread throughout July, where I provide both practical information on how to get the most benefit from the sun. We're in the sun, because when I do the course in winter, instead, I explain how to use technology to make up for the lack of sunlight. Anyway, what was I saying to you? Why did I open the PowerPoint? No, I was looking at wrinkles, skin aging.
Aging and the sun that heals.
So now I'll show you how they managed to prove that the sun ages the skin. Because you have to understand that there are economic interests at play. Making people believe that the sun is harmful means increasing all kinds of diseases. In the individual, obviously, the sun is only bad for the pharmaceutical industry, not for us. It hurts the pharmaceutical industry's profits, because if we all learned to have a happy and constructive relationship with the sun, to have high levels of vitamin D, in other words, the pharmaceutical industry would have to switch to something else. I actually have the slide where I start from the scientific research that was conducted to make the V400 filter mandatory, which is present in all sunglasses and prescription glasses. I don't know if you know that. Any sunglasses or prescription glasses you have, I had these made specifically, and they are obviously without filters. But in theory, they would be illegal, because to be able to sell them, you have to have those filters in them. Basically, it's a study that I regret, but when I explain these things, I like to back them up with documentation, just like I show you all the scientific publications that demonstrate that mortality from any cause is associated with lower exposure to sunlight. In other words, those who spend more time in the sun are the ones with the highest life expectancy. There are actual studies, the risk factor, and not just for melanoma, but mortality from any cause. Anyway, here it is. This study here, action spectrum for retinal injury from near ultraviolet radiation in a Apache monkey. This is a study from 1982. It was done on 3 eyes of Apache monkeys. I actually thought it was a breed of monkey, so I went to check what Apache means. Apache means that the lens has been surgically removed. They took 3 eyes from these little monkeys, surgically removed the lens, and then for a 2,500 watt lamp for 100 and 1,000 seconds, a 2,500 watt xenon lamp aimed directly into the eyes for 1,000 seconds for a quarter of an hour at the eye of a little monkey whose lens had been removed, just to prove that ultraviolet rays damage the retina. Do you understand how these people operate? In the same way they take animals, put them in conditions that don't exist in nature, expose them to absurd doses of ultraviolet rays that don't exist in nature, and then they show me that ultraviolet causes aging, that ultraviolet causes cancer. And here, as long as you pay, they'll prove anything. But I asked myself, excuse me, this study here, the one that was used to make Bayer's filter mandatory, obviously let's not mention names or they'll censor us, but I mean, someone might be an ophthalmologist, might be an optician, but don't you go and read them? Do you just read the title? Ultraviolet rays damage the retina. I mean, go and see how that study was actually done. Just think, last year they even tried to do some bogus studies like these to try to prove that infrared rays are harmful so they could sell products. There was already sunscreen with a filter for infrared rays too. You see? Obviously. Fortunately, I am considered the leading Italian expert in therapeutic applications of light. There are 2 people who are the top experts in the world. One is named Amblin, Jeffrey, who, when they saw that these people were trying to prove the harmfulness of infrared rays, despite tens of thousands of scientific publications, real ones, not bogus like those, that show that infrared rays are essential for the health of our cells. Gamblin conducted a study where he basically exposed all of these people, highlighting that research is not done that way. You can't use dosages that don't exist in nature, torture animals to reach conclusions that are absolutely inconsistent. And there, once again, all the benefits of infrared rays were emphasized, such as their anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving effects. The production of melatonin at the cellular level is activated, ATP production is stimulated, so energy increases. There are a whole series of benefits that have been demonstrated. Even for the skin, wound healing increases and improves greatly when exposed to infrared light. And now let me tell you, the new frontiers of natural therapies are precisely those diseases that are so difficult to manage pharmacologically: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, senile dementia, but also autism. There is this rapidly developing field of human knowledge called transcranial photobiomodulation. I have a friend who was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he was immediately told to buy an infrared lamp and do infrared treatments on his head. It has been shown that infrared penetrates organic tissues, so it passes through the skull, and for the brain, it is truly a lifesaver, because finally the cell can start functioning again as it was designed to by nature. We have always thought that the only forms of nourishment for us were food, but now we are discovering that our bodies evolved in sunlight, and for our bodies, sunlight is a form of nourishment. That is, for the mitochondria, for our cells, it is an energy they cannot do without. So it's not that sunlight is therapeutic. Sunlight is actually one of our vital necessities. If we don't receive the sunlight that our cells need to stay healthy and vital, we run into problems, and those problems are starting to emerge now. According to sound science, this is closely linked to the fact that we moved from the countryside to the cities, and ever since the invention of the light bulb, the quality of light has only gotten worse. The original incandescent bulb by Edison, with its filament, at least produced a bit of infrared, but now with LED lights, it's a disaster. Moreover, LED light, you know, there's blue light, which is a disaster, especially in the evening.
So I think I've already attended your course, The Healing Light, twice in person. And I remember being really struck by the topic of sleep, how we basically ruin ourselves because, to sum up, in the morning, exposing ourselves to the sun, there are ultraviolet rays that reactivate the body. We try to avoid the strong sunlight, which, if you're not used to it, can really knock you out around midday. The sunlight after 4 or 5 in the afternoon is beneficial because it's rich in infrared, which
produces, the rule is that you should see your shadow longer than your height. Obviously, the rules aren't the same in summer as they are in winter, because if I go to Tenerife in winter, even at midday, I still see a shadow that's longer than in summer, longer than my height, so I can stay out in the sun even then. But now in summer, the rule is just that. You should expose yourself to the sun when it's not too high and when the intensity is still fairly gentle. Anyway, what you were mentioning depends precisely on the fact that the solar spectrum is a full spectrum. It's not like light bulbs, which only have 2 or 3 peaks here and there. It's full and dynamic. In other words, in the morning, there's more ultraviolet, more blue light, and in the evening, there's more infrared, more red light. That blue light in the morning is extremely valuable because it activates cortisol, blocks melatonin, and activates serotonin. In other words, it triggers all the biological mechanisms that prepare us to wake up and face the day with energy and vitality. So for the brain, blue light means morning, wake up, it's morning. And in the evening, on the other hand, the blue light is gone. Everything is red and infrared, which instead prepares us, stimulates melatonin, and melatonin then gets us ready for a good night's sleep. And at night, you need to stay in the dark precisely to help the pineal gland produce melatonin. What happened when 30 years ago they invented the blue LED? Because LEDs have always existed, but there were only red, orange, yellow, and green ones. The blue was missing in order to create white light. So blue light was invented 30 years ago, and at that point they invented the white light LED, and that's when the disaster began. So now, among all my courses, this is actually the only one that I constantly update every time I teach it. I keep adding new slides because there is so much research coming out. Now, there are studies that have come out linking childhood obesity and myopia, as well as worsening eyesight in adolescents and children, to the change in street lighting in cities. They switched from sodium lamps, which emitted orange light, to white LED lights that emit blue light. And just a tiny bit of blue light coming into your house from the street is enough. Just that little bit of blue light tells your brain that it's morning, you see? People can't sleep at night anymore, and that's not even counting the effect of cell phones. And the television and the computer all with blue light, you see? When someone looks at their phone before going to sleep, they're dooming themselves to not sleep, because every time there's blue light, the brain thinks it's morning, you understand? If you get up to go to the bathroom to pee, you turn on the LED light with blue in it, you go back to bed and you can't sleep anymore. It's guaranteed, scientifically proven. But the problem is that blue light, which should only be there in the morning to wake you up, if you keep exposing yourself to it, every time you're exposed to blue light, your brain thinks it's morning. So it's always morning, always morning. Everyone goes crazy. The endocrine system goes haywire. In fact, there's an increase in obesity, an increase in depression. There's a complete disruption of all biological rhythms, worsening of emotional state, because obviously everyone is unhappy, because everyone thinks they're unhappy and they don't even know why, since the key regulatory nutritional element for all our rhythms and our entire metabolism is missing. So
we need to learn to reconsider the sun, which is the origin of everything. It's no coincidence that in certain cultures it's called the sun god as a source of life and nourishment. We should nourish ourselves with sunlight through our skin, following the guidelines you've given without this reckless exposure, and also nourish ourselves as much as possible with foods that have been grown with sunlight, rich in vitamin C and other essential nutrients. Instead, the paradox, to sum up, is that we slather ourselves with creams, put on sunglasses, protect ourselves from all these things, eat absolute junk that contains no nutrients whatsoever, and then when we get sick,
we think we're just unlucky. Anyway, that study I mentioned about infrared and skin, friend or foe, is by Michael Hamblin. Hamblin is one of the world's leading experts in therapeutic applications of light, especially infrared rays. Anyway, the great thing is, and I encourage everyone, including your followers, you can't just sit around anymore waiting for things to come to you on their own. You go on PubMed instead of Google. You go on PubMed, which is a scientific search engine, type in infrared or PBM, photobiomodulation, infrared, and you'll discover a whole world of all the benefits of how to manage these wonderful sources of natural energy, which are what have allowed our bodies to evolve and become what they are today. We just need to learn to respect our own nature and nature itself, because by now we no longer respect it and the benefits truly are immense. Everyone who starts following the advice to use, for example, infrared as a pain reliever or anti-inflammatory sees results. There are always people with aches and pains here and there, and everyone always turns to chemicals for that too. If you use infrared, in fact, one of the most proven effects is precisely its anti-inflammatory and natural pain-relieving action, because it eliminates inflammation at its source.
So you buy an infrared lamp like the one you have there?
Well, there are many devices available. Then, of course, there's also a lot of speculation here because there are plenty of crafty people who buy stuff from China for next to nothing and then resell it at outrageous prices, taking advantage of all the science backing it up. I always recommend incandescent infrared lamps, which are the most affordable ones, the same ones used for raising reptiles or in general for animals. These are the ones that provide the full spectrum, the whole orchestra of near-infrared, which is the same as what we get from the sun. Because if you use LED technology, the LED only gives a peak at a single wavelength, so you need to know what effect each wavelength has, and then you end up getting ones with 20 different wavelengths. Or you might as well just get an incandescent lamp, which also costs less. Anyway, I have a website, www.enthusiasmologia.com, where not only do I offer my courses, but there's also a page where I recommend things to buy, including those related to photobiomodulation, if they can be found at a good price. There are some exceptional things. For example, there's a lamp that I always recommend to all my friends with shoulder pain, and another one for the head. There's basically, what's it called? A flexible arm that reaches the floor with 5 wheels. There's the flexible arm, and there's this 275-watt infrared incandescent lamp with a power regulator. It costs about 70 to 75 euros. But having that at home, whether for rejuvenation, as a pain reliever, or as an anti-inflammatory, it's always useful when you get a little ache. But it's also good for wounds, and even for the mouth and teeth. The benefits are truly incredible and almost immediate. I have many doctor friends who have stopped prescribing painkillers and instead recommend using infrared lamps. Then, of course, we have the master, the source from which all forms of life originated, which is the sun. But the important thing is that we approach the sun with respect and awareness, so we don't want to.
Of course, I'd like to wrap up this interview because it's already been over an hour. On one hand, I want to thank you very much because in this hour, you've really distilled so many concepts that deserve to be revisited. So I invite anyone interested to check the description where I'll put your website and everything necessary for those who want to learn more. And I would like to close by saying that when we see, for example, an ant living, I'm not sure how long an ant lives, let's say it lives a week, and we say, look at that, an ant has a lower level of consciousness compared to us.
We ourselves
believe we are the most evolved species simply because we are human beings. Very likely, many wise people, many metaphysicians, many people who know a lot tell us that there are beings much more evolved than us, among which it could be that one of them is actually the sun, which makes everything revolve. Instead of
destroying and consuming, it generates and creates. But there are those who claim that even the plant world, if you think about it, the plant has this property. It is able to produce all the organic matter it needs for itself, with an excess of organic matter that it can give to living beings. From that point of view, the plant world is more evolved than we are, since we kill, destroy, and exploit instead. When you contribute more to the environment than what you found when you were born, rather than taking away, you give, and this can be considered a parameter of evolution. So it's not just about building things. If you create something wonderful, but on the other hand, there are those who, with the same intelligence, build weapons, you realize that in the end, all your intelligence has been neutralized by using it in a destructive way.
There are a lot of people, and I include myself among them, who complain about 50,000 things, but then treat themselves like crap. And so if you treat yourself that way, how can you expect to treat others and the world any differently? Fabio, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
It was a pleasure, Enzo.
For me as well, truly. I think that those who follow me, there are about 9,000 people on the Longebility channel. Some of them will have really appreciated this. Others, on the other hand, I probably made a bit angry because
Actually, they are
those friends who are in that field. And maybe every time I talk to them about it, they either run away or tell me, don't talk to me about this stuff. You're ruining my business.
Well, those are the kind of friends you're better off losing than finding. I assure you, there are plenty of happy and constructive people out there who can